Does Sonic CD happen before Sonic 1, 2, and 3? Now, shout out to Bravia. This is Bravia's theory, and it does have merit. Otherwise, I would not have made this video. So, to set the stage for Bravia's analyses, let's first look at some of the more mainstream theories of Sonic CD's placement in the canon of Sonic games. So, the release order of games would put CD after Sonic 2. Now, the origin sequencing would put Sonic CD after Sonic 1 before 2. Now, some people, if you can believe it, may try to put Sonic CD after Sonic 3. I'm not kidding about this. There was a little bit of misinterpreted misinformation, but not to worry, we're going to get to the bottom of that, guys. And then finally, the theory that you have not yet considered until today, Bravia's theory that Sonic CD happens, in fact, before all of those initial mainline Sonic games. So to set the stage, we're going to start with a quote by Naoto Oshima himself, the designer of Sonic's character and the showrunner of Sonic CD. It was his vision. So, he was quoted as saying, and I quote, "Sonic CD wasn't Sonic 2. It was really meant to be more of a CD version of the original Sonic. I can't help but wonder, therefore, if we had more fun making CD than they did making Sonic 2. Because we didn't have the pressure of making a numbered sequel." And I think that's important to emphasize. Some people will criticize Sonic CD on the basis that the mechanics that it introduced with time travel and such did not last in the series. It was a one and done. But that's missing the point. Sonic CD was never intended to be part of that mainline lineage, and the freedom that it was afforded allowed it to soar to never-before-seen new heights. So in order to kind of compare and contrast with the potential validity of the Sonic CD's first theory, let's first touch upon what for a while was sort of the default mainline understanding of the release order. Sonic CD, of course, came out after Sonic 2 and before 3, but even without Sega's official origins order and official 2025 timeline, we kind of know that the release order doesn't quite make sense in itself, even without Sonic Origins' eventual canonization of where CD occurs. Even back in the day, we had more than enough information to ask ourselves the question, how much time passes between Sonic 2 and Sonic 3? Now, is the Sonic 3 airplane cutscene that starts the game, is that Sonic and Tails touching down directly from Sonic 2's Death Egg confrontation? It can be easy to suspect that, and I think a lot of kids sort of assume that growing up, but let's now look at the translated original Japanese manual, which has the details as follows. After Sonic 2, the island crashes into the sea surface. The impact creates a giant wave, but the island doesn't sink. The floating island now sits on the sea surface as if nothing happened. Many days pass. Tails, a two-tailed fox, read a strong Chaos Emerald reaction on the Jewel Reader, a machine that he has developed. He said, maybe this has something to do with that big wave I saw a few days ago. Thinking there may be trouble, he decided to consult with Sonic. Okay, so it's only a matter of many days passing from Sonic 2 to the events that really kickstart Sonic 3. Probably less than a month. So you think about the fact that Tails was of course in Sonic 2, but then if CD happened next, there's just no Tails, and then Tails is back in 3, that doesn't quite add up. But it's straightforward enough to consider that Tails is introduced in Sonic 2, and from that point on, Tails and Sonic are pretty much a package deal, like they're going to be going on adventures together. The canon playthrough of Sonic 2 is Sonic with Tails. And it's probably safe to say that about Sonic 3 and Knuckles as well. Even though Sonic and Knuckles is only solo Sonic or Knuckles, there's plenty in Sonic and Knuckles that you can kind of write off as non-canon, as just gameplay conceits that they contrived in order to accommodate the fact that it was technically also a separate standalone purchase game at full price. But then you think about the idea that actually Tails does appear in some forms in Sonic CD itself. Many of you know about the secret screen that has Tails and says, "See you next game." Now, is this Tails giving a call forward to a Sonic Drift game that was coming up? Or is that telling us that Sonic 2 happens after Sonic CD, so Tails is telling you to look forward to his adventure? I think the See You Next Game screen is just a fun Easter egg. It was made by the Sonic 2 artist Judy Totoya, the person who designed Tails, and then returned to Japan once Sonic 2's development was finished to help out with the Sonic CD team. And of course, you also see Tails in the Tornado airplane in the DA garden. But in consulting with my community at press time, we are prepared to consider that as just an Easter egg for fun and not a canon, super important thing to consider in all this. So that's, of course, going to bring us to the Sonic Origins order, where Sonic CD happens after Sonic 1 and before 2. And this was further confirmed by the official 2025 timeline that Sonic Team put out. Now, some people will be quick to say that the Origins order makes sense because if you go from Sonic 1 to Sonic CD, it's like, okay, you start off Sonic 1 with Green Hill, and then you raise the stakes in Sonic CD's Palm Tree Panic. And Spring Yard becomes Collision Chaos. It's like an upgraded next-level iteration of those Sonic 1 zones. But what's important to stop and consider is that it's not like Eggman built Little Planet to resemble Sonic's planet and, improve upon it or iterate it. Little Planet just includes naturally occurring motifs in Sonic Universe. Geographical archetypes, even biological archetypes, but it's not necessarily a direct lineage from one to the other. Don't forget that loop-de-loops themselves are naturally occurring geological formations, as Tails has confirmed in Tails 2. So the way that loop-de-loops occur organically is the same way that eyeballs themselves in human biology, animal biology, are a natural extension of logic. Because eyeballs can sometimes seem like this divine invention with intelligent design by a higher power, but eyeballs actually evolved independently several times in many different pockets of the animal kingdom. So eyeballs are an inevitable byproduct of the logical passage of time in the same way that loop-de-loops are in Green Hill or on Little Planet or wherever else. Now, it's fair enough to ask the question in the Sonic Origins ordering of Sonic CD's timeline placement, do the movesets of this or that character throughout the games contribute to a sensible sequential lineage? Well, you think about the fact that in Sonic 1, really the only move to speak of was the spin attack. Not the spin dash, but just the spin attack, which was Sonic's capacity to roll up into a ball while running. But if Sonic CD is next in the timeline, well, now suddenly Sonic has a spin dash and a peel out. Go past Sonic CD to Sonic 2, and now it's just a spin dash. Now, the reason why I and many other people do not think that this presents a problem or a discrepancy is because movesets are just a gameplay conceit, and in most cases, they are not directly embedded into the lore of the game. Sometimes they can be. But the reason why this somewhat inconsistent lineage of moves should not concern you is because you think about Sonic Mania. Sonic doesn't have an Insta-Shield in that game, right? Where did the Insta-Shield go from Sonic 3 to Mania, right? Superstars does not have an Insta-Shield. The reason why that should not be distressing or complicating to anyone is because those movesets, in many cases, are not directly built into the lore of the games and their ongoing canon. The closest you can get to that is actually the USA manual of Sonic 2, which does directly mention the moves, and you have Tails rising to new prominence because he was able to mimic not just Sonic's spin attack, but also his spin dash. That was a big deal. Everyone was gathered in the woods watching them show off with their cool moves, and then Miles Prower makes a name for himself by doing that very spin dash attack that he is emulating Sonic. But that which I just described is from the USA instruction manual. And the USA instruction manuals are quasi-canon at best. The USA team was free to rework the lore and premise and plot of the game to appeal and make it more accessible to Western audiences. Whatever. We should not read into the lineage of moves all that much. It's like you play Metal Gear Solid 5, that's a midquel right in the center of the entire overall timeline of Metal Gear games. But despite happening in the 1980s, you have all these advanced moves and techniques that you don't have in the games that take place in the future into the 2000s and beyond. As we close in on the theory of the day where Sonic CD happens before Sonic 1, we do need to touch upon another valid possibility that people have considered, which is that if you can believe it, there was a possibility that actually Sonic CD happens after Sonic 3. After Sonic 3. Like, wow. it's valid to consider this, because there actually is a shred of evidence to support this, and it came from Naoto Oshima himself. Oshima's comments indicate that Metal Sonic from Sonic CD is in fact a more advanced version of Mecha Sonic. Now, Sparky was interpreting this and peddling this take that, Oshima said it's a more advanced version, so that means that Sonic CD must happen after Sonic 3. But this conclusion reflects incomplete critical thinking, and he was quick to peddle that thesis, but hey, to each his spark. Why does the robot being more advanced not necessarily imply a lineage of forward-moving time? Well, the way to resolve this potential conflict of robot lineage is to consider the fact that if Sonic CD involves time travel elements, well then perhaps it's just a matter of the fact that time travel was used to go forward into the future, get in touch with the good futuristic advanced robotic technology that would be done down the line, and then bring that knowledge and technology back to the present, to use that there. And that of course connects to the sort of fun layer of uncertainty and the idea that couldn't you just brush your hand aside and say, oh, well, it has time travel, so it could happen anywhere at any spot in between this or that game. Even if you are factoring in that sort of cop-out convenience, the fact of the matter is, it's still worth asking the question, like, okay, if Sonic CD involves time travel, really what we're asking as to when Sonic CD takes place is when Sonic goes to Little Planet and Amy gets captured, that's in the present. So at what point in time is that actually happening? So now, we've finally arrived at Bravia's theory, guys. The shocking and definitely worth considering suggestion that Sonic CD is in fact the first game in the chronology of Sonic games. Consider this, which Bravia relayed to us. Sonic CD was actually originally envisioned as some kind of remake of Sonic 1 or an enhanced port. So like we saw in the quote at the top of this video, Sonic CD is not a numbered entry in that chronology lineage, but it's just like, okay, this is Sonic the Hedgehog on CD. So in that way, it's almost an alternate take on Sonic 1. Now, when you look at the actual Sonic 1 that came out in 1991, you read up on the lore surrounding that game, and you find out that the events of Sonic 1 are definitely not Sonic and Eggman's first battle. Those two have already had previous battles by the start of Sonic 1's plot. So, could Sonic CD be one of those previous battles that were alluded to? The Sonic 1 lore includes the following. The evil genius scientist Dr. Eggman has embraced his evil schemes again. Eggman says, Sonic, that annoying, cocky hedgehog, thanks to him, my great plans are always ruined. But this time, I'm gonna crush him with the power of my science. Ha ha ha, evil laugh. So, you ready for this, guys? Sonic 1 is the first time, even if it's not his first conflict with Sonic, it is the first time that Eggman turned animals into robots. And as you know, he does this in Sonic 1, 2, and 3K. It says it in the manual. Eggman says, look, Sonic, this time it's different. I turn the animals on the island into robots. Everyone. All these guys move in accordance to my orders. In other words, the whole island is your enemy. This time, the world will all be mine. So this is the big thing to consider, guys. In all of the mainline numbered Sonic games on the Sega Genesis, the main premise is that animals are made into robots. This is not the case in Sonic CD. Sonic CD, you see the Metal Sonic holograms that are kind of set up like scarecrows to chase animals away. But you think about this. If Sonic CD happens after Sonic 1, why would Eggman come up with this revolutionary new plot and scheme to turn animals into robots? Stop doing that for Sonic CD, but just up and resume that sort of scheme in Sonic 2. Furthermore, did you ever stop and consider, and big shout out to Bravia for noticing this, I don't think I would have picked up on this, in Sonic CD, you ready for this? All badniks are bugs. I dare you, try and think of a badnik in Sonic CD that is not a bug. Guys, it's all bugs. Insects. Which, you know, in the hierarchy of tiers and whatever in the animal kingdom, bugs are kind of, no offense to insects and flies and stuff, but they don't have the stature and status in the animal kingdom. It's like a good starter thing. Yeah, let's just churn out some bug enemies. So if Sonic CD was like the earlier example of that, you get to Sonic 1 and it's like, whoa. Robotnik is sort of raising the stakes from his prior things by saying, all right, now I'm actually turning the animals into all different sorts of robots instead of just making bug badniks. And if you look further into the lineage of badniks, you think about Orbinauts. Now, of course, Orbinauts, as Bravia pointed out, were introduced in Sonic 1, and they became a staple that was iterated in Sonic 2 and 3. You got the fire variant, the ice variant over at Ice Cap. There are no Orbinauts in Sonic CD. So, guys, the idea that Sonic CD was potentially implied to happen before Sonic 1, 2, and 3, this is a theory that actually did hold legitimate water prior to the Sonic Origins timeline, which I'm not saying that Sega always intended CD to be first, but long before the official timeline was published in the 2020s, you could very feasibly make the case that Sonic CD is in fact before Sonic 1 and 2 and 3, that it's its own thing. It is divorced from the sequential ramping up of turning animals into badniks. And because Sonic CD was very deliberately not intended to be part of a serialized narrative across the games, the way things get ramped up in terms of the stakes and Robotnik schemes in Sonic 1, 2, and 3, I respect the case that Sonic CD happens before Sonic 1, 2, and 3. Because as a critical thinking exercise, just because Sega officially makes it so, doesn't mean that we as fans cannot consider evidence in the game that conflicts with the official quasi-retcon that gaming companies like these can engage in. Okay, so guys, should we take Bravia's word for it that CD happens first? We are ready to render the final verdict. Here at 91.6 WAYZ, the Alex Yard Zone, terrestrial internet radio, deep in the heart of Boston. So, should we defer to Bravia on this one? What is Bravia's credibility rating on Rotten Tomatoes? Because that is one thing to consider. Well, for anyone interested, it's worth mentioning that Bravia actually does aspire to make a Sonic fan game, in which he seeks to create a playable experience of the kind of thing you see in the Sonic CD opening animation, and I'm all about that. Now, based on Bravia's comments regarding the progress and game plan of this fan game experience, I would forecast generally that this hotly anticipated fan game will hit Game Banana in the year 2038. And look, that's a conservative overestimate, so potentially it could arrive a little sooner than that. So as for the Sonic CD theory, we can make up our own minds as far as an objective review of the evidence, but as far as deferring to Bravia, consider Bravia's track record when it comes to fan theories of this kind. I'm remembering the nostalgic days back in the day. It was one time that Bravia was hanging out with us for a discussion about Spider-Man. At that time, Bravia justified the Spider-Man trope of making all those quips, right? Clever, snarky lines during combat. I had kind of reacted to that aspect of Spider-Man as, it's kind of cringy and corny and makes it impossible for me to sit through. And Bravia said, well, no, actually, in fact, it's a justified character trait because Spider-Man, Peter Parker, has social insecurities, so him making jokes helps to break the tension. And you want to know how Sparky responded to that sentiment? He goes, LOL, Bravia. Sparky wasn't buying it, and neither was I. Man, those were some good times we had at times. But those days are gone. I think of them now and then.